Mom and I shared a secret. No one else knew I'm filled with the desire to live this happily. When I was in my junior year of high school, my parents got divorced. I ended up living with my mom, and my dad moved in with my grandparents, where I would receive tutoring every week. Now, as a college student, I've come to know my dad's secret, and I've developed a special bond with my mom as well. My dad is the eldest grandson of a wealthy family. My parents went to a fertility clinic after trying for 3 years without success, and it was discovered that my dad had issues. They were advised to try artificial insemination, which they did 6 times. My dad quit smoking, which he had started in middle school, and exercised to be in optimal health. My mom ate foods believed to help with pregnancy and took up walking. Despite their efforts, they faced repeated failures with the procedures and finally decided to adopt me from an agency. Adoption procedures in our country are quite stringent, but my parents' strong will navigated through the tough requirements successfully. Thanks to them, I grew up happy and well supported in a loving and affluent family. But as I grew older, my parents fought more and eventually divorced a few months before my college entrance exams. Unlike other families who might turn off the TV and focus on their child's studies, my parents didn't. Although my dad came from a wealthy family, my mom also grew up in a household as affluent as my grandparents. Both sets of grandparents generously supported us with a house and education expenses, allowing me to receive education in a good district. After the divorce, my dad lived with my grandmother and went to the office, while I visited him once a week at my grandfather's house for tutoring. After tutoring, my dad would check in on me over a delicious dinner he'd buy, reassuring me of their unchanged love. I've eventually got accepted into the college of my choice. My parents hadn't seen each other since the divorce, but they had spoken over the phone a few times concerning my career path. They decided to separately celebrate my birthday. My mom took me to a fancy restaurant, which she luckily managed to book, and we dressed up and went out for a grand meal. We used to celebrate as a family of 3, but now it was just the 2 of us, which felt bittersweet. Yet I was okay since I saw both my parents. The meal was fantastic, and my mom had something to tell me. Now that I was an adult, there were no more secrets. My dad was actually the son of my grandfather's friend. My grandfather was a businessman, and his business partner, shortly after having a son, lost the baby's mother to a tragic accident. The partner, overwhelmed by the reality of raising a newborn alone, asked my grandfather to temporarily take care of the baby. My grandfather, honoring their friendship, raised my dad. At the time, my grandparents had just gotten married and suddenly had to raise a newborn, which they did with difficulty, relying on neighbors for milk and making porridge. Sadly, the business partner passed away from illness as their business was starting to succeed. This all happened within 2 years of my dad moving into my grandfather's house. My mom lived without knowing my dad was adopted. She thought my dad didn't resemble his parents, but assumed he must have taken after someone else in the family. After their honeymoon, the grandmother expressed strong concern about the mother. It seems that she was particularly worried because her beloved eldest son had gotten married and left home. Interestingly, the father treated his younger siblings differently. They each received less attention from him. When asked about this, the father revealed that he was adopted, and his younger siblings were the biological children of their parents. The mother, having developed a strong attachment to her firstborn, feared that she might favor him over her biological children. To compensate, she generously supported the father financially, even more than her own children. However, when the father visited the grandmother's house, he often went alone and returned exhausted. As it turns out, the grandmother felt isolated and frustrated because the grandfather was often out and communication was scarce. Seeking solace, she poured out her pent-up emotions to her son's new wife. The mother, unable to ignore the grandmother's excessive behavior, finally confronted her, saying, "You need to focus on our family. It would be better if you reduced the time spent attending to your mother's emotions." Unfortunately, this conversation became a turning point, leading to strained relations between the mother and grandmother. Eventually, they decided they couldn't live together anymore and divorced. Upon investigating, it was discovered that the grandfather was deeply involved in sports. After workouts, he would socialize with fellow members, leaving the grandmother to care for the child alone. When she expressed dissatisfaction, he would throw money at her, exacerbating their conflicts. Dad said he wanted to live with Grandma, who adopted him and loved him more than her own biological children, and moved into her house after the divorce. Mom wept sorrowfully, saying she never should have married in the first place, but she always believed that adopting me and raising me was the best thing she had ever done. It seemed both Grandma and Mom relied on their son for love, missing it from their husbands, which made me uncomfortable. My mom, still young and beautiful, even though she's not my biological mother, she raised me with all her might. I felt I could do anything to make her smile. "Mom, if there's anything you want, just tell me. I'll do it for you." While fidgeting with her fingers, she said, "Let's sleep in my room tonight. It reminds me of old times." That night, I stayed with Mom. From the next day on, she kept humming happy. I don't know why, but seeing Mom getting slimmer and bringing home nutritious foods because she thinks she's losing weight is just so endearing. When I get a text during class saying, "When are you coming home today, honey?" I can feel her urgency. These days, I'm cutting back on hanging out with friends to quickly go home for Mom, sharing a secret that nobody else knows with Mom. I'm filled with the desire to live this happily.